What can you tell us about the agreement?
Well, this is a $2.8 billion settlement between the federal government and 325 First Nations in Canada. Now, this stems from a class action lawsuit that was launched more than a decade ago. And at the press conference discussing this today, many Indigenous leaders shared what losing their language, how much that hurt them, and what kind of impact this had on their lives. They talked about what residential school took away from them and their culture. Take a listen to one talking about the impacts it had on him and his family.
This is all for the people that really didn't make it here, and I really look forward to doing what's necessary, like Chief Sparrows has done, and like Chief Gottfredson has said. I don't speak the language. My grandmother told me when I was young, I don't want you to go through what I went through. So this is for them.
Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller also spoke at this press conference, and he talked about how this is the first settlement of its kind in Canada and how it's worth a huge amount of money it's worth, and saying reconciliation isn't cheap. Take a listen to what he had to say about the impacts that residential school left on people.
I also want to honor those language and culture teachers who have been doing this without any money and have trained generations of teachers to revitalize culture, sometimes outside the prying eyes of the government. They've done some without money. And I think today, the cards are a little less stacked against them.
Now, this money is meant to help address 4 pillars of development for Indigenous people. That's revitalizing and protecting Indigenous language and Indigenous culture, protecting and promoting Indigenous heritage, and promoting the wellness of Indigenous communities and their members. Now, this money builds on a 2021 Day Scholar settlement where people who had attended residential school as day school survivors who had not lived on the residential schools had been left out of a 2006 settlement, and they have been fighting for years to be able to be part of the settlement and see money for the pain that they suffered as well.
So when we talk about this money, Gabriela, where does this process go from here in terms of delivering this money?
Well, this money is going into an independent trust fund that's going to be operated over the next 20 years if this agreement is approved. Now, it is still looking for approval from the federal courts. It'll be discussed in court on February 27th. Now, in exchange for this agreement, the claimants have agreed to, quote, fully, finally, and forever release the federal government from claims that could arise from the collective harms of residential school. We'll be keeping an eye on where this money will be going and how it will be divided out, and we'll be keeping an eye on it over the next few months.
Thanks, Gabriela.
Thank you.
Gabriela, take us through this race.
Well, as you mentioned, we have 3 candidates running. The first is incumbent President Natan Obed. He was first elected in 2015. We also have former MP, Peter Itinuar, who was the first Inuk elected to the House of Commons back in 1979. As well, we have Peter Williamson, who is originally from Nunavut and is currently a student in Victoria.
And so what are the key issues in this race?
So all 3 candidates have very similar priorities. Those are housing, suicide prevention, and education. Where they disagree is how they would lobby the federal government for those issues. Obed, during his term, saw the creation of an Inuit-Crown partnership last year. That's where federal ministers and Inuit leaders have met together to discuss topics like reconciliation between Inuit and the Canadian government. He's also secured federal money for suicide prevention and for housing in one Inuit region, but he's also come under fire recently from one of the other candidates. That's because he was lobbying the Edmonton Eskimos to change their name. Candidate Williamson was saying that that's not a priority for the organization, and Obed should be focusing on more important things. Williamson, meanwhile, wants to address housing as a human rights issue here in Canada. His priorities is to address the shortage of housing across the north, which is an issue here. He wants ITK to pressure the federal government to implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Meanwhile, Itinuar wants to ask how relevant is the organization now. He thinks the organization's current electoral system isn't a full democracy. That's because 13 delegates representing all of the regions are the ones who vote in the president, not everyone. Along with the three priorities mentioned before, he also wants to address tuberculosis in the north that claimed the lives of three of his family members.
All right, thanks a lot, Gabriela. The CBC's Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi in Inuvik.
Well, the city says it could take over a week before streets are sort of looking back to normal. The city is still working on priority streets right now and says it's focusing on areas like school zones. Now, crews have started work on some residential areas, but it could take up to 9 days before at least the most needed streets are cleared. Now, here's City Manager Jeff Jorgensen explaining exactly what most needed streets means.
We're going to try and prioritize based on the hardest hit with snow volumes, the streets that are most blown in or most impassable, and also the streets that provide the most benefit and impact to citizens. So, for example, those streets, the larger crescents that lead out and collect from cul-de-sacs and whatnot that lead out into the major collectors and bus routes.
Now, roads are still hazardous, so the city is asking you to be patient when you go out driving today. Meanwhile, if you plan to be voting tomorrow in Saskatoon, there are now 7 locations, and we have more details of that on our website. So the city says to plan ahead if you are voting to make sure you have a safe way to get there. Meanwhile, if you have kids, there are no buses or taxis tomorrow for them. Both the Greater Saskatoon Catholic Schools and Saskatoon Public Schools have canceled buses tomorrow and say to call if you can't bring your child into class. However, for the Catholic schools in Martinsville and Mormon, buses are still on. Meanwhile, the city says if you are clearing snow, not to push it out onto the street, as that just creates more of a hazard for crews to deal with, and you could face up to a $100 fine. Back to you in studio.
Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi is tracking this story for us. So, Gabriela, what else did we hear from Minister Anand?
Well, we're hearing that what now on the ground, it's really being described as a volatile, serious, and unpredictable situation with more than 300 Canadians seeking assistance as of last night. Canada's Minister of Defence said that Canada is trying to get people help as quickly as possible, but also it really depends on the circumstances happening, saying that yesterday 2 evacuation flights did leave Sudan last night, carrying around 221 passengers, and that includes 68 Canadians and 6 permanent residents. Canada says it's also exploring options for both ground and sea evacuations, but timing is really of the essence here, with the circumstances really could change. Take a listen to what Canada's Minister of Defence had to say about that.
I can confirm that at least 1 Canadian evacuation flight is planned for today. The window for opportunity at the airfield is closing. And so we continue to examine a number of options to evacuate Canadians, including through maritime assets and overground transport.
And as of yesterday, over 375 Canadians have been evacuated, including on Allied aircraft, with Global Affairs Canada saying it's reaching out to Canadians in the country to see what kind of help they need. But as it was mentioned, there's a bit of a time crunch, making sure everyone can get out as quickly as possible before that window of time closes. Canada says it's working on ways to get Canadians out of Sudan, looking at warships, supply vessels, and allied ships as well, to try and get people to the port of Sudan as quickly as possible.
Gabriela, we've also heard from some of those Canadians who have managed to get out. What are they saying?
Well, we're hearing from them that it's a scary situation right now. CBC was able to speak with one Canadian who was able to evacuate from Sudan. She was in the capital of Khartoum, and she was able to evacuate via a German evacuation flight. But it's very difficult to even coordinate things right now. Just take a listen to what she had to say about the situation.
I want to tell them that it's better to try to find a way as soon as possible to leave, whether even the Sudanese civilians, they're trying to leave as soon as possible, because you literally don't know what's going to be happening the next minute, not just the next day. So if people could make it out as soon as possible, ask people around you. That's how I got out, is by asking and reaching out to people. Like, nobody reached out to me and told me, hey, this is what you need to do.
And CBC was also able to speak with another Canadian evacuee, and they expressed frustration with how Canada is handling things compared to what they said they've seen from other countries. For example, the UK confirmed as of last night they've been able to evacuate around 1,600 people, and that includes several nationals from several European countries. So keeping an eye on that, and again, Canada does say it's working with allies to try and get people home as quickly as possible before that window of time closes.
Gabriela, thank you for this. Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi for us there.
Well, I can tell you that anyone waking up this morning had a lot of shoveling to do, most likely. People coming up to things being blanketed in snow.
Court heard how this wasn't the first time Pascal Boutiette had robbed the 78-year-old. Home security footage shows him breaking in 4 days before the fatal assault on Usha Singh. During that break-in, he stole one of her bedside drawers. 4 days later, Boutiette returned with his accomplice. He brought police jackets to get inside without suspicion. The court heard Boutiette knew the senior might be home and came prepared to subdue her with zip ties if necessary. Singh was home. When she discovered she was being robbed, Boutiette tried to restrain her in a bathroom. He hit her multiple times in the face, neck, and arm. He left her bleeding on the bathroom floor, closed the door, and continued robbing her. She had a number of injuries, including brain bleeds, blood in her ears, some teeth were knocked out, and a neck fracture. The 78-year-old died in hospital days after the attack. The judge heard about Boutiette's life that included drug use and physical and sexual abuse. He has a lengthy criminal record, including 6 convictions for breaking and entering. He'd been on probation for 2 months when he robbed Singh. Boutiette spoke to the judge, saying he has nightmares about what happened. He didn't plan to hurt Singh and wishes he could take it back. Both the defense and Crown were asking for 12 years with credit for time served. He's expected to be sentenced on June 12th. Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi, CTV News, Vancouver.
The stage is set as Edmonton prepares for Pope Francis's visit starting Sunday. He's expected to make another apology on his Alberta trip for the Catholic Church's role in residential schools. Despite the city's buzz around his visit, the Pope's apology runs hollow for some Indigenous advocates. They're skeptical of the motivation behind apologizing.
I'm open to the idea that it can be a sincere and authentic apology, but we should understand that, like, the Pope said no twice, I'm pretty sure, that he wasn't going to come and do this. It's hard not to believe that the only thing that changed was all the negative, the negative spotlight that was being shone on them.
Indigenous advocates say some survivors are prepared to forgive, but not forget one of the darkest parts of Canada's history.
But there's many that feel they're not ready to get to that point where they don't feel they would have to forgive. I think it's a bigger question than just the act of forgiveness, and I'm hoping the Pope is not doing it to get forgiven.
Advocates say an apology isn't enough for the generations of harm residential schools left. They want real action and dollars from the Catholic Church to help survivors and address the impact their experiences still have today.
The harm is changed by us taking responsibility and building our own future, taking care of that. So that's, it's the support for that that's needed, not they don't have to come in and do stuff for us. They need to provide resources and dollars to help us do what we know to be the best for our community and for our kids.
It's echoed by Treaty 6 chiefs and survivors who say there needs to be a plan for mental health support in place after Pope Francis leaves.
The chiefs have been meeting with Health Canada and Indian Affairs and the papal staff to talk about a partnership. We've not gotten anywhere and nobody's committed, and we've all agreed to gather.
They say they hope survivors can get more tangible supports moving forward. Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi, CBC News, Edmonton. Eco Cafe opened in January. It's a typical cafe, but they started seeing more customers thanks to this wall's popularity online.
Had a very busy month when someone put on TikTok and people were coming to see us and to try our donuts and coffee.
Nowadays, having an interesting Instagrammable space isn't just a quirk for business, but necessary marketing. Take La Vie Academy, a medical esthetician training school. They chose a location at Manchester Square because it's a pretty backdrop for photos and TikToks.
We're aiming to, number one, have a really aesthetically pleasing location. We're aiming to have fun content, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram, to be able to kind of reach our ideal market, right? Definitely Instagram and TikTok right now are our number one things that we're thinking about every time we're doing some sort of business planning.
The Academy's right. Their location is a popular photo spot. For consumers, they use things like Instagram to decide where to go.
Sometimes I even just open Instagram and just like search the hashtag like Yeg Eats or something, and to be like, oh, what's the new place that like I haven't been to or I haven't heard about.
Even places like Kingsway Mall are taking advantage of empty spaces, turning them into photo opportunities. They bring people in and keep them coming back for that perfect selfie. Experts say nowadays being Instagrammable is just smart business.
It's a whole marketing platform, and especially as you look at, the younger demographics, they wanting to connect in an organic and an authentic way. And Instagram is a huge part of that. And spaces and physical places are having to keep in mind that they have to be Instagrammable to be successful.
A picture used to be worth 1,000 words. Now it's worth so much more. The reach of a single selfie can be better marketing these days than a billboard. Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi, CBC News, Edmonton.
Her Vision Inspires is the Legislative Assembly of Alberta essay contest.
Her Vision Inspires is a short essay contest calling for young women to describe their vision for Alberta. It closed in February. Last night, reactions to the winning essays began to circulate online. Many are slamming the third place winner. The essay describes women's role as having children with lines like women are not exactly equal to men and that importing foreigners amounts to a drive for cultural suicide. It also suggests giving women medals for having more than 2 children, a move some analysts say is a step back into dangerous times.
This is exactly what Nazi Germany did in order to, Lebensraum. It's the same idea that, women's job is to make babies to shore up, the race.
Alberta's Associate Minister of Women's Issues was head of the judging panel. In a statement to CBC, the Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville MLA says the essay contest was intended to reflect a broad range of opinions from young Alberta women on what democracy means for them. She adds the essay should not have been chosen and apologizes for what she calls a failure on her part. The NDP wants to know who else helped choose the winner.
This is not about a diversity of opinions. They've actually chosen to celebrate and, award an essay that actually is talking about white nationalist, racist theories. This is not about diversity of opinions. It's about saying a refusal by the government to say certain views are not acceptable in a democratic, free country.
In a statement to CBC, Alberta's Speaker of the Legislative Assembly says neither his office or the Legislative Assembly were involved in the contest, including the judging. The Legislative Assembly has deleted all information around the contest, including the winners, from its website. The essay author is listed as S. Silver with no additional details. The province would not provide us with the writer's name. Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi, CBC News, Edmonton.
He didn't deserve what he got.
A crowd of about 50 people gathered at the corner of Heritage Road and Henry Avenue to mourn Brian Burland. The 38-year-old man was killed yesterday during a violent attack that left 2 others injured. Police have arrested a 25-year-old man but have not charged him. Burland was from Cold Lake First Nations. Family members here at the vigil were smudging and playing drums. Burland's brother-in-law says the family were going for a walk when the group was attacked. Burland told them to run.
He saved my family. He saved my wife. He saved my kids. He saved me. He's a hero. I can't say that enough. If he didn't tell Jamie to run and go, who knows what would have happened to him.
Friends who knew Burland describe him as a kind man, always making jokes, who loved the Detroit Red Wings. They say he was the kind of person to help anyone in need.
I would have to say his last thought was of his cousin just to get her away safely. And he took the brunt of it.
His family says they're grateful so many people came out to mourn with them.
Helps a bit knowing that so many people loved him and cared about him just as much as I do, and I love all the support that's going on right now, just to feel like, you're not alone in these grieving times,
His family is remembering Brian for his kind heart and his heroic final act. They're planning a celebration of life in the coming weeks. Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi, CBC News, Edmonton. Now, what do you do if baking isn't your thing? Cummings suggests taking your regular activity and scaling down. O'Shea suspects the smaller job pool is because as restrictions lift, people would rather escape lockdown by getting outdoors this summer. They expect the resumes will be rolling in once we adjust back to the old normal. In the meantime, now may be the time for job seekers to apply. All of the companies we spoke with say people are getting more interested in creative hot tubs like this one. Whether it's building it yourself or bringing in an expert for help, there's plenty of options to turn your backyard into a hot tub haven this winter. Despite the cold, more people are getting outside amid the pandemic. But getting out isn't as simple as throwing on your running shoes and heading out that front door. The city of Yellowknife has a plan to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 30% over the next 7 years. That includes diverting 100% of our cardboard. If Yellowknifers recycled all of our cardboard, we could cut our greenhouse gas emissions by nearly 10%.
Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi.
Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi. Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi. Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi.